Now, the institution of the family is the cornerstone of every society. A government that disrespects the family by downplaying the role that parents have to play and the challenges that they face when they raise children is just contributing to a social moral disintegration. And it seems to me that right now there is a very strong message that is being communicated that in general, government knows best what is in the interest of let's say, children. Now, this comes in some cases. There are exceptions in saying that all parents are good. Of course, there are horrible parents.
Of course,
but the problem is that right now, I think we encounter a very strong message that tries to convince us that the default position is that government knows best and that government loves best. So that's where the whole thing is. And I think that in general, this shows various attempts to destroy civil society and say that we always need a middleman, the government, in order that is going to be the boogeyman that will allow us to be good to one another. Without the government, we cannot, for instance, be good to one another. Parents can be good to their children, whatever. And the point is that it seems to me that this is a very wrong way to go about it. It's very disrespectful from the government and the state officials of a society to tell the members of that society that we know better than you and we love your children better than you. That's very much disrespectful, I think. And it's not what a society should be like. And after all, I want to say that, it is an important issue because families raise the generations of tomorrow. And speaking of generations, you can visit a website and have a look at Harry and Rory's discussion about the Zoomer generation. Also, for £5 a month, you can support us and subscribe and have access to all our premium content. Now, I must say that this is a very interesting conversation.
It's nice to get Rory in front of the camera sometimes because Rory is our editor. He doesn't always appear in videos and he always puts forward very interesting perspectives. He's much more intellectual than just looking at him. He does resemble somewhat the Kuma Wojak meme, which makes it, when he opens his mouth and has deep and intellectual thoughts about Nietzsche and other types of philosophers, it makes it all the more surprising. He's a very thoughtful man, so it's good to have him in front of the camera, and it was a very interesting discussion, although I do think we only scratched the surface of this, and we did only look at kind of the surface level of Zoomer, so I think there is at the very least a part 2 in the making for this.
And
shortly,
watch it, and definitely watch it if you want to see Harry's sartorial choices for that.
I have excellent fashion sense.
Okay, now
you could be a bit more sincere about that. Okay,
we have news from Indiana and Idaho. If we can move to the next article, please. Yes. Okay. Now, if we read a bit, it says, Republican governors in Indiana and Idaho have signed into law bills banning gender-affirming care for minors, making those states the latest to restrict transgender health care as Republican-led legislatures continue to curb LGBTQ+ rights this year. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb signed legislation Wednesday that will prohibit transgender youth from accessing medication or surgeries that aid in transition and mandate those currently taking medication to stop by the end of next year. Now, there was a blue state response to this because there had to be. Was it we're going to trans your kids whether you want it or not? You'll see and you'll tell me at the end, towards the end. Now, that was Senate bill in Washington State 5599. But let us watch a bit to get some context.
I'm coming to you today because I've got some bad news and some good news. The bad news is that the state of Idaho has just banned gender-affirming care for young people in their state. The good news, though, is that here in Washington, we are focused on protecting our young people and protecting everyone in the state and people who want to travel here.
And it just reminds us all in this moment why we have to fight so hard to ensure that young people in our state get access to this essential life-giving care. We've passed legislation to do that. This year, we're focused on making sure that young people have housing and other supports.
That's our job, not only as individuals, but as a state.
People should have the ability to make decisions for their own bodies and to consult whoever they want, whether it be a healthcare provider or their family member or a religious leader, in order to make decisions about what they want to do with their bodies. We want this for adults and for young people, and we will not go backwards here in Washington.
Trying every day to make sure that we assure that Washington State is the safe place for individuals to come if they find themselves needing health care, needing reproductive care, needing gender-affirming care, and are unable to do that in their own communities.
You're going to stand with the people of Washington State and with young people and others who are coming from other states to get services here so that they can get the care that they want, that they need, and they deserve.
Trans youth across our state and across the country, we see you, we love you, we support you, and we want to create a state and communities here in Washington that provide you the place you need to grow and learn and thrive exactly as you were meant to be.
We know that sometimes that times are hard and that it is hard to hear some of this news coming from across the state, but that Washington is a place where you can be safe. And that's what we want you to do, is to be safe, to feel cared for, and to feel loved. You are loved.
A lot of old, creepy weirdos eager to mutilate children in that video.
You have all this music behind, try to give you the sense that people care for you. But I see in their phrases some things some questions that arise. So people should have the ability to make decisions for their own bodies and to consult whoever they want, whether it be in a healthcare provider, or their family member or their religious leader, in order to make decisions about what they want to do with their bodies. Now, they said nothing about age.
Well, no, the only thing they said about age was young people.
Yeah. How old are these people we are talking about? How old are these people who, for some reason, feel they have to make decisions about their bodies?
Well, according to some scientific experts, people know their gender identity in the womb.
And I want to say that if we focus on the rhetoric and on the way that these messages are communicated, we see constantly an appeal to feeling. We constantly see an appeal to how people feel respected, how they feel about their bodies, how they feel about their identities, but we never hear about how people think. And I think that this is really dangerous because emotion is very much manipulable. And one of the things that this doesn't show is that I think in raising children, you need to teach them discipline. And to teach them discipline, you need to teach them that not every time, that you shouldn't do every time what you feel like doing.
No, absolutely
there
not.
Sometimes should be a distinction. And there is and should be a distinction between how you feel and what you should do. And this is what good parents do. When they see that their children are undisciplined, they try to tell them that they try to foster a mindset of discipline to them. And I think that these kinds of rhetoric, they are at best, let's say, if I wanted to be charitable, I would say that these people are, they are very sensitive and they focus on sensitivity. If I wanted to be charitable. Now, I don't know about...
I've long given up assigning good faith to these people personally, but okay. I respect that you're trying to be charitable.
Okay, let's move forward to SB 99. Yes.
Is that SB
no, it's
5599?
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Sorry. Okay. So, Washington State could soon require youth shelters to hide minors who run away from home in order to obtain an abortion or sex change operations without parental consent.
And this is minors.
Yes, this is also minors, and you will see how they do it. So, from my understanding, in Washington State, there were some laws in place that said that when you have children seeking, let's say, shelter in particular institutions, I think in this case it's the youth shelter, that in some cases that their parents should not be contacted. But this bill changes a bit the scope of a notion. So if we see here, if we read on this article, it says that the Washington House of Representatives this week passed Senate Bill 5599, which would eliminate a law that requires youth shelters to alert parents when their child checks in, unless there is evidence the child is being abused. Now, let's pause here for a minute. As we said in the beginning, of course, there are horrible parents.
Of course.
There are horrible parents.
I've met some in my time. It's inevitable, sadly, that it will happen, but it's nowhere near as common as people in, say, Washington State or the people who passed this bill would like you to believe it is, because the immediate framing here is basically saying that if you do not go along with your child's whimsical ideas of gender identity before they're anywhere near mature enough to really understand what any of it means in the first place, you are being abusive towards them.
Exactly. And the point is, though, that this is where the majority of the people who do not, let's say, have the time to read to this, because for all sorts of reasons, that they need to be a bit more careful, because when we are looking out on the phrase that, okay, children should not be abused, of course they should not be abused. But the question is, whenever we are talking about illegal things from a legal perspective, and whenever we talk about laws and law enforcement, we should always ask, what constitutes abuse? Now, of course, sometimes there is physical abuse, there is psychological abuse, there are all sorts of abuses. But if we check let's say the next link, please. Here, this is the Senate Bill Report ESSB 5599. It says, title, an act relating to supporting youth and young adults seeking protected healthcare services. Brief description, supporting youth and young adults seeking protected healthcare services. Now, if we scroll down a bit there on the where it says brief summary of engrossed first substitute bill, it says, provided that a licensed shelter for runaway or homeless youth does not need to contact the youth's parents if there is compelling reason not to. Up so far, that can make sense. But the question is, when we're talking about compelling reason not to, what constitutes as a compelling reason not to? The immediate answer is abuse. But then we need to ask again, what constitutes abuse, or what is involved in abuse? So if we finish the sentence, it says, which includes a youth seeking protected health services. And then allows host homes to house youth without parental permission if a youth is seeking or receiving protected healthcare services.
So if I were to translate this from legalese, it's pretty easy to understand anyway, but I'm going to translate it into rhetoric for everybody. What this is saying is the state of Washington is more than happy to let complete strangers steal and house your children, all on the basis of wanting them to access surgery, which will irreversibly scar their bodies. There you go. That's what this is all in service and aid of.
I don't know if we should blame this on progressive parenting, or progressive parenting is something that comes after the main cause of the trouble. Of course, there is a variety of causes, but it seems to me that there is a problem, a cultural problem that many people face when they think that the child should never feel bad, and that if we feel bad, that there is something wrong with us. It's very natural and very human to feel bad. But if we
feeling bad is often a sign that we're doing something wrong. So if children are feeling bad about the actions they're taking, that might just be a moral response to their feeling of say if a child is misbehaving.
I think that there is a difference between feeling bad, which is natural, and feeling guilty. It seems to me that what you're referring to is a sort of the first effect of moral conscience. I think that's good. But I'm talking about the other feeling that, when you feel a bit under the weather. There are many people now, let's say helicopter parents, for instance, who completely panic over some equivalent responses of their children, and they constantly start thinking, no, my child should never feel bad. If it feels bad, there's something wrong, and I should do something about it. And they keep on trying to brainstorm, and they're creating problems where they didn't exist.
They bubble wrap the child's life, which just leads them in a position later on in their own life where they won't be able to handle any amount of conflict or negativity.
Exactly. And to be fair, this isn't necessarily something that comes from the parents. Now that children have access to social media, there are many accounts. There are plenty of accounts of people who put forward ideas of the sort, and they constantly try to create this idea of not feeling well. Okay, and that they try to say that if you don't feel well, you should do something. There's something wrong with you. The point is that it seems to me that all of this is focused, again, at least if we are a bit charitable, it comes from a very extreme focusing on on sensitivity. Now, let us watch the next video because we want to see the other side of it, the side of those who are harmed by the governmental, let's say, effort to withdraw information and shield information to parents about their children.
Hi, for those that don't know me, my name is Aurora Regino, and I am the mother that filed the lawsuit in federal court against Chico Unified for transitioning my daughter without my knowledge. I'm here today to tell my story so parents and the public know what is going on in our schools. Last year, my 11-year-old daughter was in elementary school here at Chico Unified, and her elementary school transitioned her from female to male behind my back. Shortly before this happened, my father had recently passed away, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. My daughter was distressed and began questioning her sexuality, so she decided to reach out to a wellness counselor at her elementary school. The day my daughter shared with her guidance counselor that she felt like a boy, the counselor immediately affirmed this new identity. From then on, the counselor continued to have one-on-one meetings with my daughter without my knowledge. During one of those one-on-one meetings, my daughter told the counselor she wanted to tell me about her new identity. The counselor ignored her requests and did nothing to support her in letting me know what was going on at school. Throughout her transition, my daughter changed very quickly, was bullied, and as a result, was very unhappy. And because her school kept this transition a secret from me, she was on her own. I'm a busy working mother, just like the rest of you. Before this happened to our family, I would have not believed this was going on in our schools, especially at the elementary level. I want everyone to know, I want everyone to understand that I want a space for our LGBTQ and trans community members to feel safe and supported. But the policy currently in place at Chico Unified has been damaging to our family. And I am not up here talking about what could happen if you continue this policy. I am up here telling you what did happen to our family. This was a time when she needed me the most, and you kept it a secret from me. I understand that you are trying to find ways to create a safe environment for all children within our district, but keeping secrets from parents is not the way to do it. Treating every parent as a potential threat to their kids is wrong. I know it's easy to make up a narrative when it comes to my case. I know it's easy for people to judge and say my daughter must have not felt safe or supported, and that's the reason for her telling her counselor. But regardless of what people say, I love my children, and there isn't anything they could ever do to change that. It wouldn't have mattered to me whether my daughter continued to identify as a male. I would love her the same. It's a slippery slope to allow any adult in our schools to keep secrets from parents for any reason. The actions the school board district took to immediately exclude me from supporting my daughter was very damaging to her and our family. She was very young and didn't understand what being transgender really meant or the obstacle she would face going through a transition. The school transitioned her and left her to figure it out on her own. It seems to me the district is getting it wrong on both sides. You don't know how to handle these very serious and sensitive situations because once you transitioned her, you left her to handle it all by herself, the bullying and the staff even outing her. Thank you.
Okay, this was a long video, but I thought that it was, let's say, very important to show all of it, the entirety of it.
Sorry, I just caught a glimpse of what's going to be coming up next. But yeah. on that particular video, I will have to say, and I'm not saying that what's happened to her daughter is excusable or anything like that, but she did, partway through that, she affirmed the primacy and importance of LGBT, trans, blah, blah, blah. And then I looked it up, and this Chico district that she's from within is in California. So I can only imagine that this is a woman who, up until it suddenly showed up, came knocking on her doorstep, was fully in support of this. And all of a sudden, the reality of it has come crashing down in front of her. And now she's getting up. She's still having to go through the rituals. She still has to affirm her allegiance to everything that's going on. But she's come face to face with the reality that, no, this is children being manipulated. And I can feel sorry for her, but I don't feel sorry for the fact that she is still trying to show her own allegiance to these incredibly damaging ideologies.
I really don't know what to say about this. And I really don't know whether she does this let's say on rhetorical grounds, or because she is talking to an audience, and maybe she thinks
it will be a captured audience. You're being fair there. Whatever,
but I mean, wherever she comes from, I think what happened to her is monstrous.
No, of course,
and it shows very well how dangerous a slippery slope we're in right now, because we have people at schools trying to, let's say, use the rage of children, that many children feel rage towards their parents, or confusion. They try to use it against their parents, and they try to become, let's say, I don't know, is it a savior complex? They want to somehow say, no, I know better than you
they want to become almost surrogates for these children.
Yes.
Because let's be honest, a lot of people who are pushing this sort of stuff aren't the kinds who will have children of their own. So they will look for something to replace that whole elsewhere. And if that means taking other people's children, and then molding them in your image, making them more like you, making them believe in the things that you do.
So there were some responses from the people from that school, and there was an article from the Daily Mail that shows some of them. So what this mother said: the day my daughter shared with her guidance counselor that she felt like a boy, the counselor immediately affirmed this new identity. My daughter told the counselor she wanted to tell me about her new identity. The counselor ignored her request and did nothing to support her in letting me know what was going on at school. Oliver Phillips, an educator supporting student privacy policy, claimed, "We as educators and service providers, we as educators need to cultivate an environment where students feel trust and safety and acceptance, to be unapologetically themselves without repercussions or of backlash." So again, the same question comes in. Why do you think that these children are not trusted? Why? Because their parents disagree with their assessment or interpretation of what they feel. I think again that's terribly dangerous. Now we can look at the next video, please. Squeaky Saint Francis, please.
One of the first things we learn in a healthy family is trust, and unfortunately, some parents don't trust their children when they say, "This is me," and they make that decision for them.
Oh, God.
That may make the child fearful from the people that claim to be trying to protect them. These children may see the hate and prejudice at home for people just like them, and feel the only place they can truly be themselves is at school.
Okay, I'm just going to say this person did not come from a healthy home and has no right to be talking of a healthy home. You can see the insufferable women with their rainbow badges, their badges of allegiance, nodding along in the background. The very fact that this crowd has so many people still wearing masks, I think demonstrates the character of people that they're speaking to here. The fact that this person can get up and not be immediately laughed off of the podium is a travesty.
Yes, and the message is very harrowing, because growing up is difficult. Okay, growing up is difficult. Almost no one has an easy time growing up. Okay, and I think that what this person says is very much, I would say, disgusting. Because why do you take the testimony of children as sacrosanct? And it's not an issue of testimony, it's an issue of how they interpret their own experience. They haven't developed yet the conceptual capacity to give a good interpretation of their experience. So what this person says is that parents who are not affirming or are not playing along with whatever their children say about themselves are harmful and abusive. And if we link that with the Senate Bill 5599, this person would say that, well, these people should leave their home and their parents are abusive. And we all know that when a segment of the population is being presented as necessarily abusive, the road for depriving that segment of the population of their right has been paved.
Once again, if you in the audience, I know you don't, if you're watching this right now, if you're watching this video, we know that you're a sane person with your head screwed on. If you trust this person to be able to accurately describe what an abusive parent looks like, you need to get your head checked.
Yeah. And now we could go to a new ICG report We could skip that. Yeah. So there was the International Court of Jurists published a report. It's called the 8 March Principles for a Human Rights-Based Approach to Criminal Law, Prescribing Conduct Associated with Sex, Reproduction, Drug Use, HIV, Homelessness, and Poverty. Now, this is a group of jurists who had this, let's say, document, who put forward this document, and they are they are saying that criminal law and law enforcement has consequences that has adverse consequences for structural equality, and that minorities are, let's say, harmed by existing criminal law and its enforcement, and they are trying to put forward a new kind of rights-based approach, and they're presenting all these principles. Now, if we go to page 19 of 32, we could see that Principle 2, it's the harm principle. I wouldn't say that on its own it says much, but it's very easy. It's very harrowing when we have a report like that took years to be completed. If it's so vague. So what it says there: criminal law may only prescribe conduct that inflicts or threatens substantial harm to the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or to certain fundamental public moral interests, namely national security, public safety, public order, I believe that's public health, or public morals. Criminal law measures justified on these grounds must be narrowly construed, and the assertion of these grounds by the state must be continually scrutinized. So, again, this seems to me to be like, Mill's harm principle. It comes from there. No one would say that it's okay to harm people, at least in contexts that don't involve self-defense. But again, the question is, what constitutes harm? We should constantly ask what constitutes harm. And the final sentence that says criminal law measures justified on these grounds must be narrowly construed, and the assertion of these grounds by the state must be continually scrutinized. This leaves the discussion open for ever more strict or at least you could say ever more liberal understandings of what harm consists in. Because if we take that report and let's say a politician says, no, my position is backed up by the International Court of Jurists. Mm-hmm. What they can essentially do is the following. They can say, who is my political opponent? Who are the groups that vote for my political opponents? I am going X, Y, and Z. I'm going to portray them as harmful by definition.
And for me, that opening...
because it's also needs to be continuously scrutinized. So the thing is that it's fine to say, it would be a bit more honorable to say X, Y, and Z actions constitute harm. And that's it. That would be more honorable. By keeping it open, they're allowing room for ever more.
Well, it also I understand what you're saying, but it also just opens up with the human rights legalistic framework, with the substantial harm to fundamental rights and freedoms. Well, the fact of the matter is that for the past 80 years, fundamental rights and freedoms have just been continuously expanding one after the other to encompass anything that is basically a leftist principle. Like 10 years ago, you didn't have, well, maybe 10 years ago at this point, I'd need to reference it, but 15 years ago, you wouldn't have people posting on social media saying trans rights are human rights. Yeah. 10 years ago, you might have had them saying that, but you wouldn't have had all of the courts of the law, all the courts of the land agreeing with them. Now, you do have, in places like Washington State, you do have legislatures which are more than happy to prescribe that, yes, trans rights are human rights. So if we're just going to be protecting the fundamental rights and freedoms, and those have to be continuously scrutinized, this will eventually just come to encompass everything that isn't social conservatism.
Yes, and there is a double standard there, because on the one hand, the language of human rights is supposed to be universal, and it's supposed to imply the idea that every human being has these human rights. But on the other hand, we really know how in application and how it's going to play out.
Human rights has always just meant whatever leftists want at the time.
Yes, because now, for instance, now you don't have a right to, let's say, not play along with
You don't have a right to protect your children from this.
Yeah, okay. And if we can go on page 26 of 32, on principle 16, it talks about consensual sexual conduct. Now, I will read this. It says consensual sexual conduct, irrespective of the type of sexual activity, the sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression of the people involved, or their marital status, may not be criminalized in any circumstances. Consensual same-sex, as well as consensual different-sex sexual relations, or consensual sexual relations with or between trans, non-binary, and other gender-diverse people, or outside marriage, whether premarital or extramarital, may therefore never be criminalized. With respect to the enforcement of criminal law, any prescribed minimum of age of consent to sex must be applied in a non-discriminatory manner. Now, this puzzles me. I think these are inconsistent propositions.
And what does non-discriminatory manner mean? Enforcement may not be linked to the sex, gender of participants or age of consent to marriage. Moreover, sexual conduct involving persons below the domestically prescribed minimum age of consent to sex may be consensual in fact, if not in law. So that's where the non-discriminatory manner will come. Because if you get testimony from the 7-year-old saying, I consented, whether or not this is due to under duress or anything like that, as long as you, being non-discriminatory, you being the person enforcing the law, say, well, it's fine, then I guess it's just fine now. I guess it's just fine. If you get a groomer who actively grooms the child into thinking that they wanted it and they will testify as such, then you're screwed. Then congratulations, paedophilia is now legal.
I really don't know whether this is the right way to interpret this, but honestly, I don't think it's...
I don't think it's too far off.
I don't know what it is, because it seems to me that it is inconsistent. On the one hand, it says, first sentence, consensual sexual conduct, and it says that it involves people below the age limit. Irrespective of the type of sexual activity, may not be criminalized in any circumstances. And then it says, with respect to the enforcement of criminal law, any prescribed minimum age of consent to sex must be applied in a non-discriminatory manner. To me, this sounds the opposite, that it says that whoever disrespects the minimum age of consent to sex should be prosecuted. But and therefore criminalized. But on the other hand, it says no consensual sexual conduct may be criminalized. So I think that what we're giving here is confusion. We can't make sense of it because it seems to be inconsistent.
It's not meant to make sense. There is what I can tell for certain here is there is absolutely, other than the incredibly vague harm principle, there is no actual moral principle underpinning this law. And I'm sorry, when it comes to something as important and as damaging as sex can be for many people, especially the choices that they can make in regards to their sexual health and their sexual organs in many cases, there needs to be something moral underpinning this. And this is basically just saying, go crazy. Do whatever you want.
Exactly.
If you want to use the demented knife dildo from Seven, if you've ever watched Seven, you just go ahead and that's absolutely fine.
7 times.
I'm sorry, that must have been a hefty dose of depression that you suffered there. Yeah, it's basically just saying, if you end up killing somebody, I don't know, if they consented to it, and if it was as long as it was during sex. Yeah. I mean, what if the sexual encounter is, my sexual fetish is to be murdered during sex? Okay, do we criminalize that? Does that change? Is that over a line? What's going on?
And the last thing I want to say before we finish this segment is that I think that in a way, there can always be legalistic play with the idea of consent and whether consent is informed consent, how much information
so is this an actual
be
UN document?
It's by the International Court of Jurists, and I think the UN is publishing it also under the name of UN AIDS report.
I mean, this report is AIDS. I'll give it that.
Yeah. And the final bit is that I want to say that if we just focus on consent and the idea of understanding what is going on, we may miss the idea of the consequences of something. Okay, because there's on the one hand that which an agreement may be struck, however heinous and however disgusting, but there are also the consequences. And if you want to check about the consequences of, let's say, particular, if we move forward on the Connor's interview,
to
please.
The Lotus Eaters link.
Yep.
There we go.
If you want to see the consequences of, let's say, modern gender-affirming care whatever that is, you can check Connor's interview with Richie Herron called The Reality of Trans Grief.
Yes, very, very sad. And even beyond all of that, I've got another question. What if the person... I'm sorry, I've just got so many questions as a result of that UN thing. Right, what if the person consents to be given HIV? What then? Well, they consented to get a sexual disease that's going to end up costing who knows how many people so much in just the medical care that they're going to have to take. Is that okay? Is that fine? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So it's the International Committee of Jurists along with UN AIDS and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So these will all be people who have a decent level of influence within the world legal order. Brilliant. Fantastic. Have we got anything else for that one? No. So there's a nice one to end you all on.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as premium articles, this one on reactionary feminism with an audio track for silver and gold tiers. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.